Welcome to Down the Garden Path. I'm your host, Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and plant lover. I enjoy discussing down to earth tips and advice to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. And I also aim to bring you interesting and relevant topics to educate you all about the landscaping and horticultural industry. Welcome to Down the Garden Path podcast. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm looking forward to talking about the 5 myths of growing roses with Katie Tamony with Monrovia. So Katie is the Chief Marketing Officer at Monrovia Plants. And a little bit about Monrovia. Most of our listeners will probably remember the pots, right? The name on the pots or the name on the tags. So inspired by the beauty of plants, gardens, and landscapes everywhere, Harry E. Rosedale Sr. founded Monrovia in 1926 to be a premier grower of shrubs and trees. Monrovia collaborates with plant breeders around the world to introduce improved plant varieties to North America. Monrovia plants flourish once planted to beautify gardens and landscapes. And you can always check out them on their website. And you also said, Katie, that Harry was very innovative back then.
He was really very pioneering about a lot of plant growing techniques and practices that are now, just part of the industry. One of the things that he started doing before anyone else is actually growing our plants in containers at the nursery from the get-go. It used to be that they would plant plants in the ground and then dig them up, put them in a pot and ship them to the garden center, believe it or not. And that was really hard on the plants, obviously.
Yeah.
And so he realized that the plants would do better for home gardens if they started them out in pots at the nursery. Might take a little more care doing that, but it actually resulted in plants that were healthier, more beautiful when they shipped to the garden center.
Excellent, excellent. And I was saying about how I have a lovely mature-ish weeping white pine that I know came from. I love weeping trees, and but you can only have so many, right?
I,
But I know my weeping white pine came from Monrovia so many years ago. So I love that, and your ornamental evergreens, that are grown in Oregon, very successfully, and then we ship here to Ontario, right? And they're
I,
part of the garden designs that I do. But today
yeah.
we're going to talk about roses.
Mhm.
And people love them or hate them, but everybody grew up with them. So I think everybody's got a special place in their heart for roses, don't you think?
I do think so. Roses are kind of romantic and nostalgic, like you said,
Hmm.
either we grew up with them or maybe our grandmother, grew them or
Yes.
mom did. But I think that when people think about those roses, a lot of times they're thinking about the hybrid tea,
Hmm.
roses. And today's roses, the ones that modern breeding has given us, are just a lot easier to take care of. And so I'm excited to talk to you about some of those features that
Yes.
have come on today.
Excellent. Yeah, me too. I think people do feel that roses are high maintenance. And you're right, hybrid teas or climbing roses, the ones that were kind of really in your face growing
Yes.
up, right?
Yeah.
Or stuck on your shoulder as you walk by
Right.
climbing roses.
Right.
But roses come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. I know I like the little ones, little carpet
Uh-huh.
roses, but
Yeah.
I think that's one of the top myths is that people think they're too fussy or they're a lot of work.
Yes. Yes. That's definitely something that we're trying to educate people that
Hmm.
now you can find roses that aren't a lot of work. And for instance, a rose that we have called Grace and Grit, which is a great name that really speaks
Yeah.
to the toughness but the elegance of this rose. It's a floribunda type rose, and it's on its own root. It's really not fussy. It stays nice and bushy. It doesn't get really leggy. It stays about 4 feet tall, four to
Okay.
five feet tall in the garden.
Hmm.
Um, just, covered with blooms, beautiful branching. But the great thing about it is it's less fussy in the sense that you don't need to spray it with a lot of stuff, to control for disease. It can handle heat and humidity really, really well. We
Okay.
tested it. Um, you mentioned our Oregon nursery. We have an Oregon nursery, California, Georgia, and Connecticut, and we test all of our plants at all 4 locations. And for a rose to do really well in the state of Georgia, where the pressure with heat and
Yes.
humidity is really intense, that shows us, okay, that's going to be a really excellent rose if it can withstand, those kind of conditions. So I think Grace and Grit and the new Floribunda types like it
Mm-hmm.
are really excellent choices for that gardener that might remember that beautiful shrub type rose, but want something a little easier to take care of.
Okay. And what about water? That's another one where people, where everybody's being more aware of water in the garden
Yeah.
and that roses need a lot of water. Now, I always thought they were more drought tolerant myself. Like,
Yeah. I thought so too because I'm in California and
mhm,
we certainly grow a lot of roses here where water is a precious resource. But we get a lot of questions from consumers that write into us, but don't roses take a lot of water to look good?
mhm,
And I think that's a myth, certainly. Like any other shrub, you need to get it established, in the
yes,
garden first. But once you do that, roses are quite drought tolerant. And you know, I think really handle the stress of summer and that, full sun, heat
yeah,
situation really, really well and bloom beautifully. You were talking about really liking the ground cover
yes,
type roses, and that's a great choice for the water-wise, drought-tolerant garden is choosing a nice, sort of low grower.
hmm.
We've got we're probably the largest grower of flower carpet roses in
Oh,
the
wow.
US, actually. Um, Grow just about every color you can think of flower carpets, and we know how loved they are by, landscape professionals as well as
Hmm.
home. We also have a ground cover type rose called Nitty Gritty that we introduced the same year as Grace and Grit a few years ago.
Okay.
And
Nitty-gritty.
Nitty Gritty, it's bloom power, just the way the plant gets covered with blooms. We've actually found it to be in many cases a little bit more than flower carpet in terms of really popping out the
Oh,
blooms. And Nitty Gritty White and Nitty Gritty Peach are my two favorites,
okay.
and have become the most popular in our line of ground
Really?
roses. Yeah.
Okay.
So in fact, we sent out our Nitty Gritty White to gardeners located around the country, and there's a designer in Georgia actually who's been growing it in his garden, and he just can't believe how long it's just throwing out the blooms with very little intervention. It's a self-cleaning,
Hmm.
rose. It's just it doesn't need much care at all, and it can handle, low to no water once it's established.
Once it's established. Yeah, that is key for sure. So you said white and peach are the most popular, but does it come in other colors as well?
It does. It comes in yellow and pink. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
not,
I
not
should
as
go ask back and ask what color Grace and Grit comes in. I missed that
yeah.
color.
So Grace and Grit come in white, yellow, red, pink, and a beautiful pink and white bicolor.
Ooh,
That's my favorite. It's kind of like a double delight.
yeah.
It's really, really beautiful. I
Yeah.
love the bicolor.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna look for that nitty-gritty because that's why I like them in my garden is because I don't have to do anything to them. It's not like
Yeah.
a perennial that you need to deadhead
Yeah.
and, possibly then divide in a couple of years, that type of thing. And when space, I try to, when there's new things, I do try to put them in my garden to test them out before I, start designing with them. So then, slowly I'm running out of space, right? So I have to have plants, and because of my season, I can't be babying things.
Oh, yeah.
So I really need to, plant things that kind of take care of themselves. So I love that about the carpet roses. And
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what variety I have, but I know it's like a coral color, so it's very
Yes,
unusual.
beautiful. Mhm,
So
mhm.
when people walking by, they're like, what is that,
Yeah.
and they don't and because of how short it is, and
Yeah.
the nature of it, they never even thought that it could be a rose you
No,
know
that's really true. I think, that sort of, even thinking about the term ground cover rose, what?
yes.
'Cause most people associate, the
Yeah.
shrub. But yeah, the nitty gritty gets about 2 to 3 feet high and just sort of spreads. And it also has that beautiful kind of rambling quality. A lot of
Mm.
people are looking for a less formal feeling in their garden. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's they gravitate towards the cottage look, or they just want something to be a little wilder and looser.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ground cover type roses are excellent for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've got to use the term lower maintenance, right? Which everyone's looking for. When they
Yeah.
call me for a design, they want a low maintenance garden. And I always, have to joke about, well, I don't design with plastic plants, which are maintenance because we have to wash them, right? But, low maintenance and plants that don't need you out there every weekend to, do
Clipping,
something,
pruning.
clipping and
Yeah.
fertilizing and all of
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Is and surprisingly, roses can be that.
Yeah, it's true. And, we did a survey recently among our email subscribers, just asking people, when you say low maintenance, what do you mean?
Mhm.
Is it water? Is it,
Oh,
fertilizers? Is it
yeah.
pruning? What's the number one thing? And it's pruning. It is pruning. That
Really?
when they think about wanting a low maintenance plant, it is something that does not need to be pruned because people are afraid of doing the wrong thing.
Mhm.
It's not just the work, it's I don't want to do it wrong, and like
Yes.
then suddenly I don't have the blooms I was expecting, or I did it at the wrong time, and now the plant is not, thriving. So I think that's the biggest concern people have.
Interesting. I'll
Yeah.
have to remember that because I do a talk about like a low maintenance, creating a low maintenance garden.
Um,
And one of my first thing that I say is make the garden bigger. eh,
uh,
that it
yeah,
is because
yeah,
then the plant has the room to
yeah.
be the plant and you're
Uh-huh.
not having to prune it,
Oh, I
and
love that. I
and
love
so
that.
I think people are always afraid of going, oh, I just want it to be 3 feet, deep. And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, but then you're constantly going to have to prune it and
It's true.
prune anything you put in. Even perennials will then
Uh-huh.
all overhang.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I really feel strongly, and I try to say that, bigger is better. I mean, leave the space. It doesn't mean it's more work. It's actually going to be less work because
Yeah.
you're not having to fight with the plants to keep them in that space. They can
Uh-huh.
be the size. Obviously you still have to plant appropriate. You still can't plant a plant that's 25 feet wide, in
Right.
a 5 foot bed,
Yeah.
but that type of thing. So yeah, so that's interesting that is their number one concern. I should have asked that myself, that question. So that's good to know.
Well,
But I can
and
see it because people
yeah,
are afraid.
sure. And I think the other thing that breeders have been working on that kind of helps with that idea is that a lot of plants, now are more compact, stay more compact. They
Mhm.
don't get quite as big and
Yeah.
unwieldy as, hydrangeas certainly is another one that,
Mhm.
breeders have really worked to keep the hydrangeas from getting really crazy,
Yes. Yeah.
tall.
Wagelias, right? Wagelias,
Yes,
because
Ireas, same
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. You say Wagelia in a garden club, and everybody's like, oh,
Uh,
because they're picturing the big pink
sure. Yeah.
one that,
Yeah.
took over their house growing up, right?
Uh-huh,
Uh,
exactly. Exactly. Well, and so, same thing with roses, back to
yeah,
their lower maintenance. I think we were thinking as we were testing and trialing, people don't want to be spending as much time clipping. And also there's a concern people have about pruning roses the wrong way. So how can we, give them a rose that's just doesn't need all that?
right, right. And I know the other concern, we can talk about another myth, is the prone to disease. So anybody who, again, is thinking about their parents or their grandmother's roses will remember the white dust that, we no
Yes,
longer want to do,
sure.
or,
Yeah.
fighting certain diseases.
Yeah.
And the new roses are much more disease resistant.
much more disease resistant. And, again, I think that a lot of what we've done is really focus on testing and trialing in all these different climates to put
Mm,
roses into those tough conditions, to see just how well they'll do. And yeah, but breeders have really come up with what we think of as just like stronger roses, able to
mm.
withstand some of those diseases that they might have been susceptible for in the past, whether that's black spot or, other issues.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And that yeah, that they people are knowing that what they're buying is a better plant than what
Yeah.
they would have been buying even 10 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
We have um, a rose called, well, it's a Rosa rugosa new series called Seaside Swirl. This goes to zone 3, actually, zone 3 through
Oh,
8. So, um, and this rose is so tough. It's very salt tolerant too, and it doesn't get all back to the pruning issue we were talking about.
mm,
Rosa rugosas can get really sprawly and kind of
yes.
and this stays nice and compact. Comes in 3 flower colors, pink, kind of a lavender kind of color, and then a red. And that's just an outstanding, disease tolerant, super hardy. If you thought of Rosa rugosas, before in the past, I encourage people to look at them new, look at the newer ones,
Okay.
Seaside Swirl. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because yeah, there's some good uses for those tougher ones. Even slope retention, they tend to
Yes,
be right.
absolutely.
There's a function sometimes to plants.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes you need your garden to do some things for you, and soil retention and a slope.
yep, that's true. These would be great for that use.
Yeah.
I think the other reason they're lovely is they get these wonderful rose hips, and
Hmm.
people are very interested in roses that do that. So they really
Yes.
look gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And me in a lower climate, um, or lower zone,
Mhm.
rose hips look great in the winter, so
Yeah.
they're nice. They're very attractive for I
Uh-huh.
see somebody, many of my clients want a seasonal garden, want it to look interesting all
Yeah.
seasons. And
Yeah.
winter's a long season here. So the garden should look good. So
Yeah.
yeah, rose hips are very attractive. I
Yeah.
love seeing them
Yeah.
when on walks and things like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
My camera roll I know has a lot of pictures of those, when I'm
Uh,
walking and taking pictures of snow on the rose hips
yeah,
and
they're
stuff
like
like that.
winter berries. I mean, they look
Hmm.
so charming. So we were super excited to, find a new rugosa like that because of, it's so perfect for those colder climate
Right.
gardens. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, which goes to, myth, one of the myths about, well, my garden is tough, tough conditions out where I am. And so roses wouldn't succeed here.
Mhm.
And that really is a myth, isn't it? Because they
Mhm.
are tougher than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. I think sometimes, we think that, beauty can't be tough. But
Mm,
so many plants that prove that wrong. And
yes.
roses are one of them. I mean, you look at how roses have always been part of not just like the Mediterranean climate, but English gardens. And I mean, roses can thrive in lots of different
Yeah.
uh, circumstances. Another myth or something that actually used to be true, honestly, and now it's changed, is that newer roses don't smell, you know,
Mm,
uh, we remember those romantic roses our grandmother grew and think, oh, I've never smelled a rose, since that's as
yes.
good. And for a while that was true because breeders were focused so much on disease resistance that they bred the fragrance kind of out of them. So
Oops.
honestly, yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, roses that were introduced before, they were lacking that fragrance, but now they figured out a way to bring fragrance back. And
Oh, good.
we have a rose called Eau de Parfum, actually, that's really perfumey. It's got a wonderful fragrance and beautiful, beautiful colors. I think I was talking about the peach nitty gritty before, but the Eau de Parfum has kind of a champagne color. Uh,
Oh,
sort of a, really pretty. sort of pink, bright sort of berry, uh, magenta color, really interesting colors as well as the fragrance. Um, and I think that's the other trend with some of the roses with this sort of buff or peachy color is that it blends well with lots of other colors in the garden.
Yeah.
So you don't
Yes.
have to have necessarily the red rose or the bright colors. You can have sort of the more, muted tones that make a nice
Yes.
bridge with lots of other plants.
Now, what type of rose is the eau de parfum?
It's a shrub type.
Okay, so it's a shrub.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
so
And it's got these really beautiful sort of almost like double flowers, really, really
I love
gorgeous.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really lovely.
yeah. Our hybrid teas, do you think are we still introducing new, or we've kind of moved to more of the carpet and the shrub and the floribunda?
I think we moved to the carpet and the shrub and the
Yeah,
flora. Yeah,
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 because they were the high maintenance and the disease.
exactly. More prone to that. And
Yeah.
there are still going to be fans that want that,
Yeah.
that sort of challenge. But I think for um, more of today's gardeners who don't want to be fussing so much about their plants,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
that's really where the development, lies. The other style rose that I think has come back into vogue is the climbing rose.
Hmm.
And breeders have been working on those as well. We've got Heavenly Ascent is a new line of climbing roses that um, coming pink and red, and they have these really lovely kind of smaller blooms that are sort of, I think of them as like little cabbages. Really
Oh,
pretty. Yeah, really,
yeah.
really pretty. And again, they're on their own root and they're disease resistant and just and sort of blooming, blooming all over. Um, it's nice to see some new climbers in the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is
That's when we just did a poll among our social media followers. We had a little contest every day. It was last week. We were introducing two rose varieties and saying which one, do you love the most? And the climbing one really emerged as,
really
yeah, strong, strong interest, more than the ground cover type, actually,
interesting.
which surprised
Yeah.
me.
Huh. Yeah.
Um, and then another development has been in the miniature rose,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah. They're hardy, those little guys, aren't they?
they are. And we have one called Itsy Bitsy that only gets like 18 inches tall. And it's so sweet. It's peach, um, great for a container. And when it's blooming, it's got like every shade of peach on the plant. So it's
Oh.
really striking. Looks like such a great statement plant in the garden,
Hmm.
honestly. But you can also have them in mass. That looks really pretty. So yeah, the miniature rose.
That's a nice idea, grouping them
Yeah,
together. Yeah,
yeah,
mass planting.
yeah.
Um, and to talk a little bit about native and insects. Bees love
They
roses.
love roses. They're great pollinator plants. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So, everybody who's thinking about planting for pollinators, do not forget about roses. They play a really important part. Um, and I love what you're saying about climbing roses because I think people, everybody's homes and backyards are getting smaller and smaller, right? So
Yeah.
the importance of using that horizontal space, or no, vertical space, there we go,
Uh-huh.
vertical space is
Mhm.
really important. And so I think that's exciting, that we are looking for things that will climbing hydrangeas and climbing roses that
Yeah.
can green up. We can only look at fences for so long, I
It's
think.
so true. I mean, and
Mhm.
giving the eye a place to go and also kind of just creating more of a tapestry in your
Mhm.
garden. Thinking of back to that rambling idea and
Yeah.
people being interested in having something look a little wilder. Whether that's a little bit of a meadow type effect in your garden or something where, you've got vines or roses growing up, over a trellis, over an entry gate.
Yeah.
That's just so romantic and beautiful. And
And a way to create a focal point. You need the
Exactly.
gate anyway. Like the gate is
Right.
there,
Yeah.
and you want people to go through it, and everybody has to go through it. But there's nothing wrong with making it into a garden feature, right? As
Sure.
opposed to just
Absolutely.
functional.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think that we are seeing an increased demand for our climbing roses, vines of all kinds,
Hmm.
jasmine, I think has become a staple for a lot of people in their gardens that offers a little that fragrance.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so
Yes, not
yeah,
this
lots of
far, not this
opportunity.
low zone, but yeah, but in
Right.
a container, but you
Yeah.
can grow it in a container when you can bring it in.
Sure. Yeah.
Many people like our hibiscus, and you
Right. Grow it
can.
in people.
Yep, you can successfully. I was mentioning before about our fig trees. We've got
Right.
figs growing in pots and that we overwinter in the garage. And, so you can do it if you want it. And jasmine, is very valuable in the
Yeah.
garden as far as having a fragrant,
Yes.
um,
We
you
have a
know,
hardier jasmine, but it's not so hardy that
yes,
you could grow it.
yeah,
But we're, breeders are always working on that too, trying to
yeah,
get things that are more,
yeah.
hardy.
Extend the zone across the
Yeah,
zones, right?
exactly,
and
exactly.
and climate change is helping with that a little bit too, which we talked about at the beginning, right? We're
Yeah,
growing things that we didn't used to be able to grow.
certainly.
And you might be are there things that you can't grow anymore because it's getting too warm?
Well, where I am in California, no, not
No,
yet.
okay, not yet.
But I think that that is one of the reasons. Well, I think people in the Southwest are discovering some of the toughness and heat tolerance of some Southwest natives. We were talking about,
Ah,
you mentioned
natives,
natives
yeah.
and the interest people have in that. And so, one of the things that we also, when we surveyed our email subscribers about native plants, one of the things that we learned is that when people are looking for native, the number one thing they're looking for is low maintenance. And
Mm,
when they think about that, they tend to be thinking about water use,
yeah,
especially obviously in places where it's, drought is an issue.
yeah.
But they're thinking more about the features of those native plants than the term native. And that's interesting, I think, to keep in
Mm,
mind too.
yeah.
Um, and also, there's a lot of confusion when you say native. Do you mean North American native? Do you mean native to your region? Do you mean native to your, uh,
Yes,
sort of microclimate? Because, all that makes a difference.
it really does.
Yeah, something that is a North American native might actually not do great in, where you live. So,
Yeah.
I guess it's just not the sort of end all and be all of
Yes.
gardening to
Yeah,
is
it's not a simple solution. It is much more complex, and
exactly.
we all
Yeah,
want to support the insects, and we all want
yeah,
to support the bird, which then in turn, of course, supports the birds. But it's more than that. Like it's the
yes,
just planting natives only is really not going to be the solution.
yeah,
Having a diverse garden and knowing which natives, it's a lot of work goes into that, even for me as a designer, what native is the best for that client in that scenario is
right.
tricky.
Well, and we were talking about climate, the climate changing and
Mhm.
zones changing. That's true for native plants as well. What used to perform, one way in the climate might not be doing the same as the climate changes. So
Yeah,
something
yeah.
to keep in mind.
Yes, definitely keep in mind. So that can be, hopefully I can have you back and we can talk about native plants, because I think that's a whole other show, of course. But I think it has a place in almost every topic, right?
Yes,
When we're
sure.
talking about
Yeah,
any plants,
yeah,
um, I think it's important to bring up the benefits of natives and how they tie in with
yeah.
roses. And another point on natives is that they tend to often be short-lived.
Right.
So as bloomers,
Yeah.
and so having other plants like a rambling, carpet rose, or ground
Sure.
cover rose, or a
Yeah.
pop of color like a floribunda rose
Yeah.
can really bring a lot to your native plant garden. And again, it's still serving the bees and still serving the
Absolutely. Yeah.
insects
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things like that. So
Yeah.
diversity, I think, is really key
I think
in our
that's
gardens.
That's the key thing for people to keep in mind. And, diversity and climate appropriate. Keep those things in mind and you'll
Yes.
succeed. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I think we covered them all. So roses are not too fussy.
Right.
Um,
Give them
they
a
are
try.
not necessarily prone to disease. What else are we? And roses are not water hogs. Once established, they are actually very low maintenance. And anybody who grows them should know that, really. But I think it's and they are bringing back the fragrance. So I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that's exciting as well. I wrote down, I think that's a great post. Fragrance is back, baby, right? Like with the
That's
roses.
it. That's it.
And roses can grow in all kinds of conditions. Even if you have tough growing conditions, you can still. And I think about the farm properties, right? Like, every they always had roses, and to me, that's the tough,
Absolutely.
right? That's the tough
Right.
growing. Where they're 30 feet from the house and out
Yes.
in the field, and
Yeah.
no water, no,
Right.
over the septic beds, maybe even those were tough growing conditions, and roses did
Exactly. And
great.
roses still thrive. So
They
yeah.
did. Yeah. So that's great. So thank you so much for this show, and I'm excited to remind everybody that there are
Yeah.
the roses belong in everybody's garden in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. They're low maintenance, beautiful color, long blooming, wonderful smelling. They make
Yes.
great flowers, to bring
Oh
inside.
yeah,
Too.
definitely.
So many reasons to grow them.
That's right. And I love that we can grow them in North America, and we're not, because the ones you buy at the florist, those are ones coming from other countries, and
Right.
the carbon footprint of those
Sure. Yeah,
is again a
absolutely.
whole other show. So,
Yeah.
the fact that you can have these little things in your own yard
Mhm.
is wonderful.
It's such a gift, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited. And I'm excited we learned a little bit more about Monrovia, and everyone can take a look at their website,
Yes.
monrovia.com, to learn about more. And of course, you're supplying the garden centers. So look for their pot and their information at your local garden center, and always ask if there's something you want. If there's some of the roses we mentioned, that'll all be in their show notes.
Mhm.
You don't see it, then you definitely need to find someone, find the manager of the garden center,
Yep.
and ask for it. So
Thank you. Yeah, look for the
welcome.
green pot, but yeah, ask your garden center
That's
to
right,
care.
the green pot. I wasn't sure. I knew it was in my mind. It was green, but I didn't want to say that in case it was no longer green, because
Still
marketing
green.
changes things,
No,
right?
no, still
But it
still
is the
green.
green pot with the gold lettering, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I know. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the show today, Katie.
Thanks, Joanne.
Okay.